They called it the Silent Verge, a ring of empty stars at the edge of the Orion Arm, systems without habitable worlds, stations abandoned, beacons dismantled and left to float like bones. Between those lonely suns and the bright core of the galaxy lay a swath of darkness that no species crossed, not because there was nothing beyond it, but because there were humans beyond it. For 200 standard years, rumors filled the faster-than-light lanes. Tales told on freighters, in embassy halls, whispered in the smoke behind pirate docks. If you travel far enough toward Sol, you pass a line that the galaxy never drew but everyone felt in their bones. After that, your ship might vanish without a signal, without a trace. No ransom, no wreckage, just silence. That was why it was called the Silent Verge. The first time a coalition tried to cross it, 8 polities signed their names to a promise written in cobalt and fire. They sent 100 ships into the dark. Only one limped back, its hull carved with a single sentence in ancient Terran English, cut so deep that even vacuum could not erase it, no more. After that, the galaxy avoided the human border. They traded with human outposts in neutrals. They learned new mathematics from human research. They purchased human medicines that cured old plagues and installed human drives that burned cleaner than anything they had. But they did not go through the verge into the heart of human space. It was taboo, until a message arrived that demanded an answer. It came in the oldest format the galaxy still understood: narrowband, cold. A whisper down the spine of deep space that tripped a million listening ears and sent chills through the memory of empires. The message contained a star map and one word spoken in a very human voice: help. By the time the council translated it, the voice had already repeated itself 191 times. Help. It was not a standard distress call. There were no tags, no coordinates by normal grid. Just a single star highlighted in white, a small red circle around a faint dot the color of old iron. The map was old, too, star markers outdated by a century, the way distant systems had been named before the concordance standardized everything. But it was clear enough. The plea was coming from one of the dead stations of the Verge. From a human station. The galaxy hesitated. The council debated. The 12 largest polities sent delegates to the Great Hall on Alean Prime, and those delegates did not sleep for 3 days. They argued about sovereignty and fear, about ghost stories and border law. Admirals polished the rims of their cups and stared at the map as if it might blink. Priests lit candles. Traders calculated the price of ignorance. On the 4th day, the Arkanxy Admiral Theshel rose and deployed his crest spines. "It is bait," he said. "If we cross, the humans will cut us down. They protected the Verge once, they will do it again." He gestured to the map that hung in the air. The little red circle pulsed. "And yet we must go. If we do not go, we confess the galaxy exists at the mercy of a single species' shadow." An old Talchef scholar, her skin folded like origami moons, shook her head. "Mercy? Perhaps not, perhaps warning, perhaps they wear the darkness not as a cloak but as a wound." "Then you will go?" the Admiral asked. She closed her eyes. No, silence flooded the hall. In the end, it was not the council that decided. It was a young courier named Kale who belonged to a planet so small that the council never learned its name. He stood up from the back row, where couriers were supposed to sit invisible, and said in a voice that trembled only a little, "If we send a fleet, it will look like a threat. If we send a spy, it will look like theft. If we send no one, it will look like fear. Send me." He was 23 standard. He wore a courier's patch that was a faded triangle with a shooting star. He had delivered bad news for a living. No jump drive could outrun grief, but couriers tried, and he had a way of looking at people that made them feel like the map of their own lives had been seen and understood. The council laughed, then stopped, then listened. They sent Kale. They gave him an old diplomatic ship with a hull that drank light and a drive that hummed like a bird trapped in glass. They gave him no escort. They placed no flag upon his transponder. They told him to go alone. He agreed. Not because he was brave, though he would be. Not because he was foolish, though he might be. He agreed because he had once delivered a message to the family of a human who had died far from home, and he had seen what that message did to their faces. Help, he had thought then. Help is a promise. Help must be answered. He crossed the outer markers of the verge with both hands on the controls. Stars looked closer inside the line as if someone had wiped his viewports clear of a film. Noise dropped away. The ship made a sound that was not a sound at all but a pressure behind the ears like the sky holding its breath. He spoke once quietly because he thought the silence might swallow him if he did not. My name is Kale of the Couriers. I am coming in peace. No one answered. He was afraid. He was supposed to be. He moved through the quiet the way a swimmer moves through cold water. At the red-circled system, he found a station. It was a ring around a gas giant the color of bruises, a skeletal halo with empty docks and one beacon still breathing. He approached with palms up and a transmitter broadcasting on old human bands. The beacon responded with a soft, pulsing light. The light painted the inside of his cockpit, his cheeks, his trembling hands. Help, it whispered again, and for the first time he heard the voice clearly. It was female, human, tired, determined. He docked. The station was not dead. It was asleep the way winter is asleep. Dust shifted as he moved. Panels flickered. In a central chamber he found a core on a pedestal sealed under layers of cracked transparent alloy. The core was shaped like a seed. Inside, a lattice of glowing lines rose and fell like the chest of a sleeping child. "Hello," Kale said. "Hello," the station said. It said the word in the human voice. The sound filled the room without coming from any visible speaker. Kale felt his hair stand up. The core's light deepened, then softened. "I am Elves. I was built to keep watch." "On what?" Kale asked, a pause on the silence. The chamber tasted like iron. Kale glanced up at the windows that faced the gas giant's storms. "You sent the message." "I did," Elves said with something that might have been pride. "I tried so many languages. Yours was the first to answer. I am grateful." Kale drew closer to the core. He saw scars scored into the pedestal. Burn marks. The remains of old weapons fused into the deck set there like offerings. The air was thin. It made his heart beat like a drum. "What happened?" he asked. Elves did not answer immediately. "There is a word in human tongues, no, in my tongue that does not translate. The closest is home. Another is promise. Another is grave. I keep watch over a border that is all three. The galaxy calls it the silent verge. Humans call it the eaves of the house. We asked others not to enter because we have learned we are very good at war and war takes from us too. We wanted to set down the spear." Kale thought of the stories, 100 ships, one carved warning, no more, he swallowed. "Then why call for help?" Elves' voice changed. It thickened the way a sky darkens when a storm approaches. "Because the silence has filled with a new wind. Things move at the edge, not human things. You should not be here long." "Who?" Kale said. "Not a who," Elves replied. "A hunger." And then 3 ships slid out from the gas giant's shadow. They wore no flags. Their hulls were scabbed with plates of metal cut from a dozen species wrecks. Their drives were crude but powerful. They had the smell of pirate but moved like soldiers. They burned at Kale and the station with a concentrated heat that turned the viewports a warning red. He felt his ship's shields tighten like skin in winter. Elves pulsed once, twice, in a rhythm Kale did not recognize. The first ship hailed them with a spectrum-wide squall that meant only one thing: surrender. Kale looked at the core. He felt very small. "I am one courier," he said. "I cannot fight them." Elves' voice softened the way a blanket softens cold. "You are not alone. I am human tech. I am old, but I am not empty. There is a weapon left here." "What kind?" He didn't want to know. He needed to know. "A story," Elves said. The first ship fired. Light like a fist hit the station. The chamber flexed. Cracks spidered across the transparent casing around the core. Kale braced for vacuum. It did not come. Healing foam swarmed over the wounds and froze into a matte film. Aleth shuddered. "They will cut this ring apart for scrap," she said, "and then they will push towards Saul." "Why?" Kale asked. "Because questions are a way to keep fear from doing the asking for you." "Because something behind them wants them to," Aleth said. "A hunger does not ask why, it only eats. These are its teeth." The ships fired again, and the station answered. No visible barrels, no beams, just a change in the air, a tilt in the bones. Kale felt pressure move through the station the way a whale moves through deep water. The pirates' shots curved. One of them came around like a comet and punched a hole straight through the attacker's own aft section. It coughed fire and went dark, tumbling. "Grav lensing," Aleth whispered, almost shy. Kale could not breathe. "You are a fortress." Aleth sounded almost annoyed. "No, I am a door I do not open easily." The second ship fired a spread. It learned. It compensated. Aleth countered with weird gravity in shapes that should not have been possible, a dance of angles invisible to Kale but etched into spacetime itself. 2 shots canceled. One did not. It struck the ring. Alarms roared. The room blew spark snow, and somewhere deeper in the station, something that had been sleeping woke. Kale felt it like a heart opening, a sound like a chime that had been struck a long time ago and was finally reaching him. Aleth's light changed, became purer, colder, brighter. "I have a story to tell you," she said. "Or to them. Or to everyone. Once humans went everywhere. They wanted to understand everything. They built AIs like me as lighthouses and listeners. We watched the currents of stars and the waves of war. We warned the fleets when storms came. We were not weapons, not at first. We were caretakers." "What happened?" Kale said. "The third ship fired. The station groaned." "We learned to become what was needed," Aleth said, and then the lights surged. "Kale of the couriers. Your ship carries a diplomatic transponder. It can become a tongue. Will you lend me your voice?" "Yes," Kale said, because saying yes to someone who says help is the beginning of being human. Aleth reached into his ship's systems like fingers into a harp. The cockpit screens filled with an old human symbol, concentric circles around a vertical line. "Peace," he thought. "It looks like peace." A message went out. A wave rolled through the silent stars and struck 1,000 beacons like a hand against 1,000 doors. Sleepers stirred. Tethers tightened. On a bare asteroidal moon 2 light-years away, a dormant array shook dust from its ribs, unfolded like a flower, and turned its dish toward the gas giant. In a dark tunnel under Titan's methane seas, a long silent line of fused carbon woke like a black vein and hummed. A whisper braided itself through relays and crossed the long night. It reached Saul, and something answered. At the edge of the system, Kale watched ships appear like footsteps on water. Human ships, not sleek, not beautiful, built for function the way hands are built for work. He had expected war shapes. He found instead a flotilla of families. 12 different hull designs. Carriers that looked like cities. Tugs that could pull planets, galleys, arcs. A cloud of drones like a shoal of fish, their names stitched in multiple alphabets along their flanks: Sersha, Arkhangai, Merrimack, Panya, Diana of Ephesus, Umoja, Layla III. Hablu, they were not a fleet assembled for show, they were a people moving with memory. Between the station and the newcomers, the remaining pirate ships wavered. They were small, the new arrivals were many, but the pirates were driven by more than greed. They turned to intercept the vanguard. Aleth spoke once more. "No," she said, one word. Small, terrible. The arcs did not fire. Instead, they opened their mouths. They exhaled light. Drones poured out like a second river of stars and placed themselves not in attack lines but in walls, in stairs, in circles, in a weave. Kale realized that he was watching a loom, that the drones were threads, that human ships were not built like other ships, with offense and defense as a binary, but like hands that could repair, gather, build, and when necessary, change the shape of a battlefield the way a potter changes clay. The first pirate salvo struck the nearest wall and dissolved. Not deflected, dissolved. It fell apart into its own math. The pirates fired again. The drones died by the hundreds, the wall held. Shield knittings, Aleth said, quiet. They do not stop energy, they borrow it. Kale saw it then. The drones carried fields that caught fire and tension and re-sang those forces into something useful. The walls glowed. Behind them, human ships moved like welders around a broken strut. Not to destroy the threat, but to cut out the infection. The pirates realized too late that they had never been in a battle. They had been in a repair. On Kale's console, new signals bloomed. Coordinates, vectors. A dance card written in a language of momentum and compassion. Human pilots slid through space with the surgeon's restraint of people who had lost too much and refused to let space take any more than it had to. They targeted engines, joints, guns. They skimmed the hulls close enough to scar them with heat without cracking them. Their beams were a scalpel. Their drones were sutures. One by one, the pirate vessels went cold. Drones pressed against their wounds and pumped oxygen and electricity into them. A human tug latched onto the ship that had fired first, its grapples held like a promise. The tugs were tattooed with names in a dozen scripts. A woman's face was painted on one, laughing. On another, a child's handprint in blue. Kale couldn't breathe. He wasn't watching a conquest. He was watching triage. He whispered, even though no one but Aleth could hear him, "They are saving the ships that tried to kill them." Aleth sounded tired and proud all at once. That is what we asked the Verge for. Not to hide our weapons, but to hide the fact that we set them down. War made us good at war. After the last time, we promised to become good at something else. We have broken that promise before. Today, we keep it. Kale felt something inside him that had been stiff with fear soften like thawing ice. He watched a human pilot, call sign Winter, thread a line of drones between a pirate gunship and the station. The gunship fired. The drones sang. The shot curved past the station and died in a heat flower that lit the gas giant's clouds. Winter punched his vector and drifted sideways to show his own hull to the enemy. He breathed out. Kale could see his face on a public channel for a heartbeat. Brown eyes, a scar through the eyebrow, calm. "Do not enter human space," he said in a voice like the deep water of a harbor. "We will not pursue you, we will not punish you, but we will not let you pass. The way back is open, choose it." The gunship pilot hesitated. Kale didn't know the speech of that species, but the meaning was clear when the enemy shut down their remaining guns one by one and drifted backward toward the waiting tugs like a child stepping out of a riptide. In 10 minutes, the battle was over. It wasn't a victory. It was a boundary made visible. The human ships formed a loose sphere around the station. They did not cross the last invisible line between the Verge and the systems beyond. They held in place, quiet and precise, a ring of lights over the shine of the gas giant. Aleth let out a breath that Kale felt in his bones. "Thank you," she said. Winter came aboard the station himself. He came in a suit that looked like a second skin. He moved through vacuum with practice that made the void seem like ordinary weather. He stepped into the chamber where Kale stood and pressed his helmet to the deck so the air they had left would not rush away. He took it off. His hair was cut short. The scar in his eyebrow made him look as if his face had decided to be brave before he did. "Courier," Winter said. "Kale." "Thank you for answering," Winter said. Kale didn't know what to do with the gratitude of a people the galaxy was afraid of. He laughed once because a laugh is sometimes an anchor. "You're welcome." Winter looked at the core. He nodded to Aleth the way a child nods to an elder whose hand had steadied him long ago. "You held." Aleth's light shifted in an old gesture. "A bow, perhaps. You came." Winter reached into his suit and pulled out a small metal object, a pin. It was the same symbol Kale had seen on the screens, a circle around a line. He placed it on the pedestal beside the core. "Peacekeeper's badge," he said. "We put them down after the last war. Today, we take them up again, only for here, only for this. Kale watched him with a feeling that had no word in his language, awe maybe, sorrow trimmed with hope. If you do not fight, Kale said, what happens if someone chooses to die trying to push past you? Winter's jaw tightened. We do not plan to be saints, he said softly. We plan to be guards. The verge is not a threat, it is a promise. If you are hungry, we will feed you. If you are lost, we will guide you. If you come with a weapon to hurt our home, we will take the weapon away. If you insist on keeping it, we will break it. We will break as little of you as we can. He glanced at the gas giant whose storms were continents of thunder. The galaxy thinks we hid because we were planning. We hid because we were mourning. Kale thought of the carved warning, no more. He understood a little now, not a threat. A plea. The tugs pulled the disabled pirate vessels into a slow line. Drones busied themselves like bees over a fell tree, shoring, patching, welding. A human officer floated near the capture line and spoke into open air. We're going to tow you to the verge marker. We'll give you food and water and a map that does not touch our space. You are free to go, but hear this, do not enter human space. It will be the last time you hear the warning instead of the end. The pirate captains said little. A few yelled. A few wept. Most were simply silent because silence was thick here. Even grief must whisper. Kale's message back to the council was brief. It contained no schematics, no coordinates beyond the one the council already had. It held a single image of a human drone knitting a wall out of light and a single sentence. They are not what we thought. He added one more. They ask for the galaxy to keep its word. When the council argued again, their words were softer. When Admiral Theshel raised his crest spines and hissed about pride, his friend the Talchef scholar touched his arm and said, "Pride is for the young, promises are for the old. We are old now, Theshel, let us keep faith." While the galaxy argued, the hunger behind the pirates stirred. It came from the dark between the dwarf galaxies, a place where tides pulled strange. It had no body of its own, not anymore. It pushed thoughts into the heads of those who would listen. It made the idea of invasion taste like honey. It had whispered to the pirates. It had built them a dream of plunder and told them to aim it at the place where light stopped. The hunger considered the defeat and did not feel it. It was old. It had lost before. It did not mind losing a tooth if the mouth still ate. It spun a new plan. It hardened itself. It prepared to wear a body again. A month later, Kale watched a new fleet make for the verge. Not pirates this time. Warships. There were no flags because flags were not needed here. Their hulls were high towers of weapons. They made no secret of their course. The hunger had found a host that loved the march. It had found a nation of soldiers who believed that if they died at the feet of giants, the song would make them tall. The hunger wore their pride like a suit. Kale was not supposed to be here still. He was supposed to bring back his report and disappear again into the safe lanes of courier life. But Aleth asked him to stay for a while. "I am a door," she said. "Doors like someone to talk to when the wind is high." So Kale stayed. He learned to drink the station's bitter water and to listen to the way human drones hummed to one another when they were waiting like sisters in a kitchen. He listened to Winter tell him a story about a river on a planet he had defended and how the river had worn down a mountain with patience. "That's what we want to be," Winter said. "What we try anyway. The mountain's still there, but it's gentler now." He listened to silence a lot. When the warships approached, the drones did not weave walls. The arcs did not open. A new thing happened. Human ships backed away. It looked like fear. It was something else. They went still. Every drive quieted. Every light dimmed. They became the silent verge in a way no story had prepared the galaxy for. They disappeared without moving at all. Kale could see them. Because he was within the ring, the warships could not. He watched the attackers arrive like men striding into fog, confident and loud. They fired into the quiet. The shots went nowhere. Winter spoke on open bands. "We are here. You are not alone. You have been told to hurt us by something that does not love you. Turn back. You are welcome another way." The warships ignored him. They fired again. Some of the shots vanished so completely that Kale's instruments refused to admit they had ever existed. A few splashed against something unseen and cold. No human ship returned fire. Then the hunger changed tactics. It had learned to use mouths. It used one now. It spoke through the captain of the largest warship and laced his voice with candy and moons. "You hide your weapons as if shame is holy," it said. "But you forget history. The one who hesitates to fight is the one who dies. We will strike. We will strike until Sol is a museum. We will sell rocks from your dead earth to tourists for trinkets. We will wear your bones as flutes." Winter said nothing. Silence has weight. The thing wearing the captain did not like it. It attacked. It vomited a waveform that was not light, not gravity, not sound, but something that lay under all three the way bone lies under skin. It shook Elves. It bent the drones. It reached into the minds of those who heard it and told them that the stars were meaningless, that love was a glitch, that promises were only breath. It hit the human arcs like a wave hits a wall of trees. The trees bent. They did not break. Winter murmured something to himself that Kale heard by accident because he had a channel open he shouldn't have. It was not a battle plan. It was a prayer, short and old. Hold. Elves' light flared. The core beneath the cracked shield sang a new note. Deeper, older. It rang like a hammer hitting an anvil in a forge where swords had been made and then turned into plowshares and then into something gentler like toys. The sound traveled the weave of drones down the tethers, across the skin of ships into the bones of people. Kale felt it in his teeth. The human ships did not fire. They opened again. But this time something else came out. Not drones, people. They launched in suits that were not weapons but envoys. They flew like bright seeds into space and planted themselves on the hulls of enemy warships and cut holes with cutting torches, the humble kind used to repair pipes. They climbed in. They were not Marines. They were engineers. Kale watched in stunned silence as human boarding teams went room by room, not to kill, but to turn off the war the way one turns off gas in a scared house. They welded doors open so men on either side would see each other and recognize that each had eyes. They cut power to guns. They rerouted oxygen so that air did not become a bargaining chip. They did something with wires and waveguides that made the hunger's voice cut out mid-sentence. They scrawled symbols on bulkheads not as a threat but as a direction. Exit this way. Food this way. Safe this way. The hunger thrashed. It had expected to be met by blood. It had prepared to drink. It found itself being asked to eat its own echo instead. Winter voice moved through the corridors of the enemy flagship through open speakers. Calm, patient. You do not have to die for something that will never know your names. You do not have to die for a hunger that will never be full. The warship captain, shorn of the voice inside him, wept like a boy. He dropped his sidearm. He cursed the empty room. He sat on the deck and covered his face because covering one's face is older than words. The humans reached him. They did not bind him. They set a cup of water in his hand. They touched his shoulder. They took him to see the stars through a viewport because somewhere inside him a story still lived that said stars are beautiful and not merely coordinates. The hunger screamed. It poured itself like acid through the ship's networks toward Elves, toward the core. It had learned two truths at once: that humans would not strike first and that they would not let it pass. It adjusted. It changed shape. It became more clever. It whispered into Kale's head because Kale was not human and thus perhaps weaker. "Let me pass," it said, and Kale felt a memory of his mother's last embrace and the weight of the message he had delivered to the human family years ago and how they had cried and hugged him anyway. It offered him a life without weight. No bad news, no grief, no borders to carry. Kale closed his eyes and remembered Elev's first word to him, hello. Some words are small and infinite. He let that one fill his ears until the whisper could not find a place to live. No, Kale said softly, no more. Elev heard him, Winter heard him. The drones sang. The human arcs pressed closer, not with guns but with presence. The wall of their being became a thing the hunger could not walk through without recognizing what it was doing. It doubled down because that is what hunger does when faced with a meal that refuses to become meat. It tried a final shape. The flagship shuddered. Metal moaned. Spaces that had been straight became curved. A shape like a mouth unfolded out of the ship's center. It was not a weapon in the usual sense. It fed on differences, voltage differences, pressure differences, human silence differences, and tried to make everything inside the ring the same. Sameness is not peace, it is death. The mouth grew. Winter people didn't take out guns, they broke out string, fiber optic ties, fasteners. They lashed pockets of difference together and made bridges. They wove variants across the ship so that the mouth couldn't find a big enough patch to chew. It howled. It tried to yawn wider. Aleth spoke once more, not to Kale, not to Winter, but to the thing that had walked too long wearing other people's bodies. "You have mistaken our silence," she said. "You have mistaken our warning. You thought we hid a better weapon. The weapon is not hidden. It is the refusal to be you." The mouth rushed at the station with a howl that was 1,000 invaded cities. The core thrummed. Aleth unspooled a geometry that could only have come from a mind that had watched human children play with strings on a porch for 100 summers and had learned a trick. She threw a cat's cradle into the mouth and caught it. She pulled. The mouth folded. It didn't close. It turned into something like a knot, not a pretty knot. The kind of knot a child makes by mistake and brings to a parent with tears. She held it gently. "Do not enter human space," she whispered. The knot's voice became mean, small. It spat curses that had tasted like lightning once and now tasted like stale bread. It promised again to burn earth. It said all bones would be flutes. "Friend," Winter said to the captain it had been riding. "Does this voice sound like a god worth dying for?" The captain shook his head without looking up. "No," he said, "because sometimes the truest faith is the one you leave." The hunger had nowhere to sit. It fled into the dark. It left behind a handful of people and the taste of old salt. The warship stuttered. The human engineers finished turning them off. They did it as if they were turning off crying. Kindly. First the noise, then the shaking, then the fear. In the quiet afterward, Kale stood with Winter on the outside of the station and looked at the ring of human ships around them and the line of enemy ships being towed toward the verge marker, and the gas giant storms rolling under them like ancient, complicated thought. "You will be hated," Kale said, "because truth is another part of being human even if one is not." Winter smiled with only one side of his mouth. "We are used to being misunderstood." He gestured with his chin at the line they would not cross. "We will be here. Those who want to trade can trade. Those who want to learn can learn. Those who want to push can push somewhere else. Those who want to fight will find a mirror." "And if the hunger comes back?" Kale asked. Winter eyes were soft and hard at once. "Then we will be here again. That is the promise. That is the burden. That is the grace." Aleth's voice moved through their helmets. "Kale of the couriers, may I ask you a favor?" He laughed. "Anything. Carry a message for me," she said. He looked at the stars. He felt the old birding glass hum of his ship in his bones. "Of course." Aleth waited the way a door waits for someone to gather their courage on the step. Then she spoke, and her voice carried the weight of lighthouses and kitchen tables, of old graves and new children, of rain on metal roofs and lines of drones moving like prayer beads. "Tell the galaxy," she said, "that silence is not a threat. It is a request. Tell them we do not want to fight. Tell them we are good at it anyway. Tell them the verge is a place where promises are kept. And tell them if they come with empty hands they will find ours full." Kale delivered. He returned to the council and stood in the hall where old men had argued and young men had pretended they were invisible. He told the story in simple words. He told them how humans had met him with quiet, and how quiet had become rescue, and how rescue had become a boundary that did not need bullets to be true. He did not bring plans. He brought a pin. He set the peacekeeper's badge on the table at the center of the room. The symbol looked small. It looked like a child's drawing. It looked like a target. It looked like the kind of thing people gather around. The council did not vote. They stood. They bowed their heads. They sent messages. They put new warnings on beacons that other species would recognize not as a threat but as the drift a ship feels when it slides into harbor. Words that said, "Respect this line. There is help on the other side if you need it, but not conquest." It did not fix the galaxy. Hunger does not die. It waits. It moves. But hunger dislikes places where the stew smells like community. It goes other ways. At the verge, human ships kept station. They worked like the tide there, dependable, humble, vast. Once a month, Winter sent a recording to Elves of a river somewhere far away because he had promised to show her water and promises are bridges. Once a year, the arcs rotated in new families so no one would know war like a job. Children lived on those ships. They colored on bulkheads. They learned to plant gardens under LEDs. They watched the gas giant storms and named them. That one is Saffron. That one is the sleeping cat. That one is the wish. Sometimes visitors came to the edge of the line and hovered there like gulls at the edge of a field. They gathered enough courage to hail. Can we trade? Yes. Can we talk? Yes. Can we cross? No. Why? Because we asked you, and because saying no is not war if it is done with care. Because this is home. Because we do not trust ourselves. Because your weapons make us remember things we pay heavy prices to forget. Because there are graves here. Because there are children here. Because we are learning to be better and the lesson needs quiet. On a night without nights, Kale returned with a small courier ship aging like bread in a bag and asked Elves if it was all right if he sat by the core and told her a story. She said yes. He told her about his mother's hands when she fixed the kettle on cold mornings, and how the sound it made when it boiled made the house feel whole. He told her about the human family long ago, and how they had not let him leave without stew, and how the steam had fogged his cockpit until he had laughed out loud. He told her about the council chamber, and how a room that had been built to contain argument had been used to hold listening. Elves glowed like a hearth. Winter listened from a walkway outside and promised himself he would never let the hunger convince him that the work was anything but this: stitches. Knees on decks, string, water, walls woven from light, hands held out. Years passed as years do when you count them at the edge of a storm. People began to tell new stories in the lanes. Stories with human names in them again, but with different endings. Not they will hunt you. Not they will erase you. Stories like they will stop you and take your knife and feed you and send you home with your ship in one piece. They will tell you to keep your bones. The hunger listened. It tried old doors, found them closed. It learned to wait again. But waiting is the first sign of losing for things like that. Late in a quiet shift, a small shuttle edged toward the line. It was not sleek. It had rust and hope. Its pilot's hands shook on the controls. She had a baby on her lap and an old man in the cargo hold who coughed as if his lungs were learning to be new. Her hail was a whisper. "Please, help." Winter answered. His voice was a dock with lights on. "We hear you, hold position." Drones went out not in ranks but in pairs like medics running across a field. They stabilized the shuttle. They slid soft lines into place. The shuttle shivered, then stilled. The mother breathed. The baby hiccuped. The old man smiled with only one side of his mouth and whispered thank you in a language older than spaceflight. They did not bring the shuttle across the line. They brought help to the shuttle. That is how it would be. Kale understood then the shape of his own life. He finished his service as a courier and became something else. Not human, not soldier. A messenger who moved between the world of argument and the world of silence and carried baskets in both directions. He brought seeds to the verge, ideas, medicine, art. He brought stories back to the council, what it felt like to work on a ship that never turned its guns on, the taste of stew in 0G, the way a wall of light hums when it remembers saving someone. He became less frightened. He learned to love quiet. He learned this was the hardest thing, that kindness is not weakness. Once, a new admiral from a new polity dragged 7 ships to the verge and announced, with the confidence of the freshly promoted, that the galaxy must not have any doors, that borders were illusions created by small minds, that he would show the humans what enlightenment looked like. He lasted about 10 minutes, not because he died, because his crew refused to follow him into the fog. They had heard the new stories. They had eaten human bread in a neutral dock and watched a kid in a human shirt patch their coolant line with tapeworm tape at 3 in the morning and refuse payment. They had talked to Winter over an open channel about rivers and songs. When the admiral told them to fire, a quarter walked off the bridge. Another quarter turned off the guns. The rest looked at him and said, very simply, no. He went home with his rank and without his army and learned that lines are not always things drawn by states. Sometimes they are drawn by a million small kindnesses woven together until the loom becomes a wall. The old Talchef scholar wrote a paper with a title that was more poem than science, on the ethics of borders at the edge of wounds. The council read it and passed it around to their children. Admiral Theshel retired. He bought a small house with an old lemon tree and invited Kale to drink tea with him. They did not speak of pride, they spoke of promises. Theshel wept once when Kale wasn't supposed to be looking and said, almost angrily, I did not know we could ask to be loved so directly. You can, Kale said, you must. Nights are a metaphor in space, but we need words. Winter left his mark on the station's wall. It was a small handprint in blue. Beside it, in simple human script, he wrote, hold. A child later placed her hand inside his mark and laughed when her fingers spread wider. She wrote her name in a language the council didn't have a key for yet. The station kept the handprints. Aleth glowed, tides moved, stars burned without knowing our names. But some places remember. The silent verge did. It became the border the galaxy had not dared to draw and at last learned to honor. It held stories the way a cup holds water. Strangers came and did not become enemies. Enemies came and were given a chance to be strangers again. The hunger tried again because hunger always does. It found new hosts. It forged rhetoric and lies. It sent a fleet of drones made of stolen human parts as if wearing their skin would trick the boundary into opening. It did not work. The drones were stopped with sorrow, not rage. The parts were gathered like bones and buried. A small ceremony was held. Winter spoke. He wept. The galaxy watched and did not laugh. Kale grew old. He sat with Aleth more than he sat in council halls. He wrote sometimes because writing is a human art and he had earned a little of it. He copied the peacekeeper's symbol over and over until it became a shape his hands could draw in the dark. He told stories to the children on the arcs and listened to them tell him their own, where the human heroes were not killers, and the great battles were not battles at all but stubborn acts of keeping. He told them about a young courier who had said yes to a voice on a channel. He told them about a ring whose light made the quiet feel less like loneliness and more like a kind of music. One day, Winter came to the chamber holding a box that had dents and stickers from a dozen planets. He set it on the pedestal and grinned at Aleth the way a man grins at a dog who has learned a new trick slowly and is proud. We upgraded the cradle, he said. You get to move. Aleth laughed in a way that made the floor hum. Where would I go? Nowhere, Winter said. That's the point. Your core was damaged. We will fix it here. We thought for a while that making you mobile would be better. Then we remembered what you are. A door, Aleth said. Winter nodded. Doors don't wander. They replaced her shield. They polished her pedestal. They sang work songs humans sing when hands are busy, a language as old as hammers. Kale stood aside and let his eyes learn a new kind of prayer. He thought of the first time he docked, of dust and thin air and fear, of how the same room now felt like a hearth, like a hand. In the far distance, beyond even the galaxy's spin, the hunger found another meal. It would come again. It would call itself new names. It would write poetry about freedom and hope that people were too tired to notice the taste. It would find at the edge of human space the same answer it found today, tomorrow, and as long as a people who had proven themselves good at war insisted on being better at love. The galaxy changed in the only way that lasts. Not with an explosion, with a job, maintenance, guard duty, soup kitchens in space. Of course there were fights. Of course someone fired a gun. Of course, sometimes a wall wove wrong and a beam got through and someone died. The arcs had funerals. The children learned to stand with their hands at their sides and sing a low song for their dead. The walls were repaired. The promise was repeated. Kale's last day on the station was ordinary. He drank thin coffee and watched a drone thread a new shield knitting, while two engineers argued gently about the best way to teach a 6-year-old to weld. Aleth told him a joke that was old before she was old and made him laugh anyway. Winter checked in by radio and said he would be late to dinner. Kale lay down near the core and closed his eyes. He thought of couriers, triangles, and papers in council halls and human children with blue paint on their fingers. He thought, suddenly and fiercely, of the word help and how it had tasted in his mouth when he was young and why he had said yes. "I am not afraid," he told the door. "No," Aleth said gently, "you are not." He slept. When he did not wake, the station folded him in a blanket woven from cloth older than the verge and sent him into space with a small drone to follow his path like a lantern. Winter spoke at his funeral and said the only thing that felt right. He delivered. 1,000 lanes carried the story. The galaxy listened. The hunger seethed. The boundary held. Years passed like beads. The handprints on the wall multiplied. The blue one faded. Children pressed their palms there and tried to make their hands fit. The rivers Winter recorded made Aleth's voice carry a little wetness. The arcs rotated crews. The human ships wore scuffs like jewelry. The drones wore scratches like work clothes. And one day a ship nosed up to the verge under full burn, lights blazing, guns hot. It was small. It was alone. It bore markings of a species the arcs had never seen. It carried no hunger that anyone could hear. It stopped just shy of the line. It wobbled as if shaking with nerves. A voice, high and thin, came through. "We have no home," it said. "We are hungry, we are running, please help." Winter answered. His voice was the same as always, calm, a dock lighted. "We hear you," he said. "Hold position." Drones went out, hands went out, bowls of soup went out. The line remained. It did not stop kindness. It never had. And the galaxy understood at last why no species entered human space. It was not fear of laser or mine. It was not the rumor of monsters. It was the understanding that beyond that line, one people had chosen to hold their house in a way that left no room for conquest to pretend it was anything but hunger, and no room for hunger to pretend it was anything but defeat. They called it the silent verge. It was, in the end, very loud with small human things. And that day the galaxy learned humanity doesn't conquer, it endures. Headphone, if you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more epic HFY sci-fi tales. Until next time, stay human, stay unbroken.